Most people hear the words diesel prices, and they immediately tune out. They think, that's a trucker problem, that's a shipping problem, that has nothing to do with me. And I get it. If you drive a regular car, you probably haven't looked at the diesel price on a gas station sign in years. You just glance at the regular unleaded number, wince a little, and keep driving. But here's what I need you to understand, and I mean really understand, because this is going to affect your life in ways you are not prepared for. Diesel is not just fuel. Diesel is the invisible backbone of the entire American economy. It is the blood running through every artery of commerce in this country. Every single thing you buy, every piece of food you eat, every package that shows up at your door, every material used to build the house you live in, it all moved on diesel at some point. And right now, as of early April 2026, the national average for on-highway diesel has hit $5.40 per gallon. In California, it has blown past $7. In states like Pennsylvania and Connecticut, you are looking at well over $6. A year ago, diesel was sitting around $3.46 a gallon nationally. That means in roughly 5 weeks, diesel prices have surged over 50%. Let me say that again, over 50% in 5 weeks. The last time diesel crossed the $5 mark was back in 2022 during the early chaos of the Russia-Ukraine war, and even then it was brief. What we are seeing right now is not brief. The conflict involving Iran and the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow waterway through which roughly 20% of the world's oil supply normally passes, has sent global energy markets into a tailspin. And the effects are about to cascade into every corner of your daily life in ways that most Americans are simply not thinking about. Here is something that should genuinely alarm you, and it is the first domino in a chain reaction that ends at your kitchen table. Trucks move over 80% of all agricultural products in this country. More than 90% of your vegetables, your fruit, your nuts, your dairy, all of it rides on diesel-burning 18-wheelers crisscrossing America's highways. And right now, the people who drive those trucks are being financially destroyed. The national average to fill a single long-haul truck has gone from roughly $700 to well over $1,000 in a matter of weeks. An owner-operator getting 6 miles per gallon at $5.40 a gallon is paying nearly $1 per mile just in fuel before he even begins to earn a single cent of income. Fuel typically accounts for about 20 to 25% of a trucking company's operating costs, but at these prices, some firms are reporting fuel eating up 30 to 35% of their total expenses. The research firm FTR Transportation Intelligence has calculated that fuel costs per mile jumped 21 to 24 cents in just 3 weeks, the largest increase over that short a time frame ever recorded in the history of American trucking. Think about what that means. A trucker running 2,500 miles a week just saw his costs increase by $500 to $600 per week overnight. And here is the part nobody is talking about. These truckers get paid by the mile, not by the hour. They do not get automatic fuel surcharges on the open spot market. They often do not get paid for 30 to 60 days after hauling a load. So they are paying $5.40 a gallon today out of their own pocket, and they might not see payment for the freight they just moved until June. The cash flow crisis alone is existential. Owner-operators across the country are parking their rigs. They are literally turning off the ignition and walking away because it costs more to run the truck than they can earn. An economist at the University of Minnesota estimates there are roughly 450,000 owner-operators hauling long-distance freight in America, and thousands of them are being pushed to the breaking point right now. When those trucks stop rolling, the freight does not move, and when the freight does not move, your grocery store shelves start getting thinner. What most people do not realize is that diesel does not just move your food from the farm to the store. Diesel is woven into every single stage of food production itself. The tractor that plows the field runs on diesel. The combine that harvests the grain runs on diesel. The trucks that haul the raw grain to the processing plant run on diesel. The machinery inside many of those plants runs on diesel generators. The refrigerated trucks that carry your meat, your milk, your frozen goods across the country, those run on diesel too, and they burn even more of it because they are powering massive refrigeration units 24 hours a day. When diesel crosses $5 a gallon, it does not just add a few cents to your grocery bill, it compounds at every stage of the supply chain. A farmer in Iowa told NBC News that his nitrogen fertilizer went from $795 per ton just days before the Iran conflict started to $990 per ton by the end of March, a nearly $200 jump in weeks. And that is on top of diesel going from $3.76 to over $5.50 in his area. For a cash grain farmer using no-till methods, you are looking at roughly 3 gallons of diesel per acre just for planting. At $3 a gallon, that was $9 an acre. At $6 a gallon, it is $18 an acre. If you are running a 1,000-acre farm, that is an additional $9,000 just in planting fuel costs. For hay farmers, the numbers are even worse. It takes about 3 gallons per acre per cutting to cut, ted, rake, bale, and transport hay to storage. At $6 diesel, that doubles the cost per cutting to $18 an acre. Over 3 cuttings per season, you are looking at an additional $6.75 per ton in fuel costs alone. The American Farm Bureau Federation says we are now heading into year 4 of consecutive losses across the farm economy, and farm sector debt is projected to reach a record $624.7 billion in 2026. That was the number before the war started. These farmers are not absorbing these costs. They cannot. They are passing them forward to the distributors, who pass them to the grocery chains, who pass them to you. Now let me talk about something that almost nobody in the media is connecting to diesel prices, and that is the cost of literally everything you order online. On April 2, 2026, Amazon announced that it would be slapping a 3.5% fuel and logistics surcharge on every single third-party seller that uses its Fulfillment by Amazon service. That surcharge kicks in on April 17th for FBA in the United States and Canada, and by May 2nd it will expand to Buy with Prime and multi-channel fulfillment. Think about what that means for a second. More than 60% of all units sold on Amazon come from independent third-party merchants. That is millions of small businesses, entrepreneurs, and sellers who are about to see their fulfillment costs jump overnight. Amazon says the average increase works out to about 17 cents per unit, but that is just the average. For larger, heavier items, it is significantly more. And here is the thing that should really concern you. This is not just Amazon. FedEx and UPS have both already raised their fuel surcharge rates and slapped additional fees on shipments to and from the Middle East. The United States Postal Service announced an 8% fuel surcharge on packages starting April 26th. Every single shipping company in America is doing the same thing at the same time because they all run on the same fuel. When Amazon sellers get hit with a 3.5% surcharge, they do not eat that cost. They raise their prices. Every single product on Amazon, from the toothbrush you buy, to the phone case, to the supplements, to the kids' toys, all of it is about to get more expensive. And if you think this is temporary, I want you to look at what happened in 2022. Amazon implemented a 5% fuel and inflation surcharge back then that was also called temporary. Industry analysts have pointed out that these fees have a historical pattern of being introduced as short-term measures and then quietly becoming permanent parts of the cost structure. Sellers on Amazon's forums are already saying it. One wrote that temporary surcharges have a way of becoming permanent. When costs go up, sellers pay more. When costs go down, fees stay the same. That is not a temporary adjustment. That is a one-way increase. The construction industry is another sector that is about to send shockwaves through the economy in ways most people are not anticipating, and it all comes back to diesel. Every major piece of equipment on a construction site runs on diesel. Excavators, bulldozers, cranes, dump trucks, compactors, pile drivers, concrete pumps, generators, all of it. A large construction site can burn through thousands of gallons of diesel every single week. But the impact goes far beyond the fuel tank. Diesel prices drive up the cost of producing and transporting the raw materials that go into every building in America. Steel, cement, glass, asphalt, plastics, insulation, all of these materials either come from petroleum-based production processes or require enormous amounts of energy to manufacture, and that energy is overwhelmingly diesel and natural gas. The Associated Builders and Contractors released data showing that construction input prices climbed at an annualized rate of 12.6% during January and February of 2026, and that was before the Iran conflict even started. That is a staggering rate. The chief economist noted that the data did not yet reflect the oil price surge, which had pushed crude near $100 a barrel at the time of the report, and has since pushed well beyond that. When construction costs spike, it does not just mean bigger buildings cost more. It means the house you want to buy costs more. It means the apartment complex your landlord is building costs more, and your rent goes up to cover it. It means road repairs cost more, bridge projects cost more, school renovations cost more, and your local taxes go up to pay for all of it. The construction industry already needed an estimated 500,000 additional workers in 2026 just to meet projected demand, and now you are layering on input cost inflation that could force project owners to put developments on hold entirely. One industry executive warned that there is a limit to how many price increases the market can absorb before owners simply stop building. When they stop building, supply contracts. When supply contracts, prices for existing homes and rentals go even higher. Let me bring this back to something very personal. Your weekly grocery bill. Because the grocery store is where diesel prices hit the American family the hardest, and the numbers that are coming are going to be brutal. Wholesale prices for raspberries in Boston have already jumped about 40% since January. And that is just the beginning. Economists at Wedbush Securities have warned explicitly that if the Iran conflict keeps diesel prices elevated, it becomes a direct hit on consumer prices, and groceries are the first place you will see it. The reason is simple math that most people never think about. A head of lettuce grown in Salinas, California, has to travel roughly 2,800 miles to reach a grocery store in New York City. Every single mile of that journey burns diesel. A crate of avocados from Mexico crosses the border and rides on a diesel truck for hundreds of miles. Bananas come off a container ship that burns marine diesel, get loaded onto a diesel truck at the port, ride to a diesel-powered distribution center, get loaded onto another diesel truck, and finally reach your store. Every single touch point in that chain just got 40 to 50% more expensive, virtually overnight. And it is not just the transportation. The plastic packaging your food comes in is made from petroleum. The refrigeration at the warehouse runs on diesel generators in many facilities. The forklifts moving pallets in the distribution center run on diesel or propane. That has also spiked. Grocery stores in Tucson, Nashville, Colorado, and across the country have told local news stations that they are already seeing increased delivery and transportation costs from their distributors, and that these costs are going to be passed to customers. One grocery store co-founder said the price increases have not fully hit invoices yet because there is a lag. Distributors lock in rates and fuel costs take weeks to work through the supply chain. But he said it is coming, and when it arrives, it is going to be sticker shock at the register. There is a dimension to this crisis that almost nobody is discussing, and it has to do with the feedback loop between diesel prices, farming costs, and the Federal Reserve's ability to control inflation. Economists have estimated that a 10% rise in diesel prices adds roughly 0.1 percentage points to headline CPI. That might not sound like much in isolation, but diesel has not gone up 10%. It has gone up over 50% in 5 weeks. You are looking at potentially half a percentage point or more added to the consumer price index just from diesel alone, and that is before you factor in the secondary and tertiary effects. The Fed had been cautiously navigating a path toward rate cuts. Interest rates had already been reduced from their peak, with the federal funds rate sitting around 3.50 to 3.75%. There was optimism that inflation was cooling enough to allow further reductions that would bring relief to mortgage holders, car buyers, and anyone carrying variable rate debt. But diesel at $5.40 per gallon throws a grenade into that entire plan. If inflation reignites because energy costs are embedding themselves into every product and service in the economy, the Fed cannot cut rates. It might even have to raise them. And if the Fed raises rates in the middle of a cost of living crisis driven by a geopolitical conflict, you are looking at a scenario where Americans are simultaneously paying more for everything they buy and paying more to borrow money to buy it. Mortgage rates, which many people were hoping would come down towards 6% by late 2026, could instead climb back above 7 or even 8%. Auto loan rates could push deeper into double digits for buyers with average credit. Credit card APRs, which are already hovering near record highs, could climb even further. This is the nightmare scenario that very few analysts want to say out loud. Diesel is not just making your groceries more expensive. It is threatening to reverse the entire trajectory of monetary policy and lock Americans into a prolonged period of high costs and high borrowing rates simultaneously. What makes this diesel crisis fundamentally different from anything we have seen before is the structural fragility of the trucking industry itself. This is not 2008, this is not even 2022. The trucking industry entered this diesel shock already weakened from the worst freight recession in modern memory. After the pandemic shipping boom of 2020 and 2021, when freight rates climbed nearly 40% and anyone with a truck was printing money, the market completely collapsed. Consumer demand slowed, rates cratered. The industry found itself with too many trucks chasing too little freight. Between 2022 and early 2026, thousands of mid-size carriers and independent operators went bankrupt and exited the market entirely. Companies like STG Logistics, Standard Forward Freight, and Bulmax have all filed for Chapter 11 in 2026 alone. The irony is devastating. For years, trucking has been in a contraction, capacity has been leaving the market, And just when the remaining operators were starting to see the faintest glimmer of recovery, diesel hits $5.40 and potentially heading for the all-time record of $5.81 set in June 2022. Some analysts are warning it could blow past that record within weeks if the Strait of Hormuz situation does not resolve. The truckers who survived the freight recession by refinancing their equipment, by tightening their belts, by working longer hours for less pay, they are now being asked to absorb a 41% spike in their largest daily expense. A trucker in South Dakota who runs Hellbent Express told CNN he had just refinanced his equipment because he believed the recovery was finally coming. He was seeing real progress. Then the war started, and his costs exploded. He is now considering parking his rigs permanently. When he fills up his 18-wheeler, the pump hits $999 and shuts off before the tank is even full. That is not a metaphor. That is literally happening at fuel stops across America right now. And every single truck that parks is one less vehicle moving the goods that fill your stores, stock your shelves, and keep this economy running. Now here is something that really illustrates how unevenly this diesel crisis is hitting different parts of the country, and why some Americans are going to feel this far more brutally than others. The regional price spread for diesel right now is absolutely staggering. In California, diesel is exceeding $7 per gallon, nearly $2 above the national average. California imports roughly 75% of its oil, about 20% of its jet fuel, and 10% of its gasoline, much of it coming from Asia and the Middle East. Energy executives have warned that California is on track to see actual fuel shortages if the Strait of Hormuz remains closed in the coming weeks because Asian refineries are burning through their stored crude and will soon start cutting production. Meanwhile, in the Gulf Coast states like Texas and Louisiana, diesel is closer to $4.70 to $4.85, still painful but nearly $2.50 less per gallon than what someone in Los Angeles is paying. That means a trucker filling up in California is paying roughly $500 more per fill-up than a trucker doing the same run starting from Houston. That regional disparity has massive consequences. Truckers are now making routing decisions based on where they can buy the cheapest fuel, not where the freight needs to go most efficiently. Some are refusing loads that require them to drive through California or the Pacific Northwest entirely because the fuel costs eat their entire margin. States like Arizona, Nevada, and South Carolina have seen diesel price increases of 60 to 68% year over year, some of the sharpest spikes anywhere in the country. For communities in these states that depend on long-haul freight from distant distribution centers, the cost of everything from building materials to fresh produce is going to jump disproportionately compared to areas near refining hubs. Indiana just implemented a new gas tax increase on April 1st, piling on top of already surging prices. This is not a uniform national crisis. It is hitting different regions with wildly different intensity, and the communities farthest from domestic oil production and refining infrastructure are going to bear the heaviest burden. And if you think this is just an American problem, think again, because the global ripple effects of $5 diesel are going to boomerang right back to your doorstep in ways that cross borders and oceans. Europe is already reeling. European economies were never fully recovered from the energy shock of the Russia-Ukraine war, and now they are getting hit with another wave of diesel and heating oil shortages. The Strait of Hormuz carried about 7% of Europe's liquefied natural gas imports in 2025, and those supplies are now disrupted or rerouted at massive cost. European industrial equipment, precision components, medical technology, and specialty chemicals that American businesses and consumers depend on are all getting more expensive to manufacture because European factories are paying more for energy. That cost gets baked into the price of everything they export to the United States. Africa is even more exposed. Large volumes of fertilizer pass through the Strait of Hormuz, and African economies are critically dependent on affordable fertilizer and fuel for their agricultural systems. When those costs spike, crop yields in Africa drop, and the global supply of coffee, cocoa, and critical minerals for electric vehicles and energy storage all tighten up. Your morning coffee, your chocolate bar, the battery in your electric car or your kid's tablet, all of it traces back through supply chains that are being squeezed by the same diesel crisis. The gig economy is getting crushed too. Uber has already rolled out expanded fuel discounts and higher earnings incentives for drivers through May 2026 because the cost of delivering your food and driving you to the airport has skyrocketed. DoorDash drivers, Instacart shoppers, Amazon Flex delivery workers, all of these people are independent contractors who pay for their own fuel and do not get employer fuel surcharges. Every dollar increase at the pump comes directly out of their earnings. Many of them are already running spreadsheets every day to figure out whether it even makes financial sense to accept a delivery. When enough of them decide it does not, Your delivery times get longer, your surge pricing goes up, and the convenience economy that millions of Americans have come to depend on starts breaking down. This is not a localized disruption. This is a systemic shock that is hitting every layer of the global economy simultaneously, and the United States sits right in the middle of it. I want you to think about something that goes beyond groceries and Amazon packages, because diesel prices at $5 a gallon affect dimensions of the economy that are completely invisible to most people, until it is too late. Diesel powers the generators that keep hospitals running during power outages. Diesel powers the equipment that maintains water treatment plants. Diesel runs the machinery that paves and repairs the roads you drive on every single day. Diesel moves the materials that build the schools your children attend. When municipalities see their fuel budgets double, they do not just absorb it, they cut services, they delay road repairs, they defer maintenance on water infrastructure, they push back school renovation timelines, they raise property taxes. This is not hypothetical. This is the documented pattern from every previous diesel spike. But here is what makes 2026 uniquely dangerous. America was already dealing with a massive infrastructure deficit. The American Society of Civil Engineers has consistently given the nation's infrastructure a near-failing grade. Bridges are deteriorating, water mains are bursting, the electrical grid is strained. Now you are asking cash-strapped state and local governments to maintain all of this infrastructure while paying 50% more for the diesel that powers every maintenance vehicle, every piece of repair equipment, every construction machine. Something has to give, and what gives is always the thing that regular people depend on most. Your roads get worse, your water pressure drops. Your school gets the temporary patch instead of the real fix, and all of it traces back to that number on the diesel pump that you probably drove right past without looking at today. Let me leave you with this, because I think it is the most important thing to understand about what $5 diesel means for your life going forward. This is not a temporary inconvenience. This is not a one-month blip that will correct itself. The structural conditions that created this crisis, the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, the geopolitical instability in the Middle East, the chronic underinvestment in domestic refining capacity, the fact that the United States produces mostly light crude oil that is better suited for gasoline than diesel, all of these conditions are either long-term or getting worse. The U.S. actually has to import distillate fuels to meet domestic diesel demand, and the global refining picture is getting tighter, not looser. Even if the conflict in Iran were to end tomorrow morning, energy analysts have warned that prices may not return to pre-war levels for months or even years. The supply chains that have been disrupted take time to rebuild. The LNG plants in Qatar that were damaged during the conflict, the ones that produced critical feedstock for fertilizer, they have stated that recovery could take years. The fertilizer that is not flowing through the Strait of Hormuz right now, the diesel that is not being refined from Middle Eastern crude, the shipping routes that have been rerouted around conflict zones at enormous additional cost, none of this snaps back overnight. And in the meantime, every single cost increase that is working its way through the supply chain right now, from the farmer's field to the trucker's tank to the grocer's shelf to the Amazon warehouse, every one of those increases is going to land on the American consumer. Your grocery bill is going up, your Amazon order is going up, your rent is going up, your property taxes are going up. The cost of building anything, repairing anything, maintaining anything in this country is going up. And the worst part is that most Americans will not connect these price increases to diesel. They will blame the grocery store, or the landlord, or Amazon, or inflation in the abstract, but the truth is simpler and more frightening than that. The invisible fuel that moves the entire American economy just got 50% more expensive, and there is no clear timeline for relief. The diesel price is not a line on a chart somewhere. It is the price of everything you buy, everything you eat, and everything you depend on. And at $5.40 a gallon, and climbing, that price is about to change your life, whether you are ready for it or not.